My name is Lori Power. I'm a group benefit consultant. Part of what I do is connect with awesome people, hopefully on a weekly basis, and have good conversation about what matters. And today we're going to talk about content and content that connects. And in that, we have Rob joining us from Road55, which I think is a fantastic company logo that it really catches my eye. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how you get started, and Road55?
Well, thank you very much, Lori. Great to be here, and I was excited to get the invite, and always up for talking about content and that. My background, I'm in Edmonton, Alberta. I'm in my studio right now. We're right downtown. We're about a block from Rogers Place, the rink, the ice district, and looking forward to the world kind of reopening again and seeing lots of people down here. But I'm a fourth generation Edmontonian, and the joke is they haven't figured out a way to kick us out of Edmonton yet. And a big business background, the family and the community, always very involved in different things. And I grew up playing hockey, and as soon as that was done, I attended NAIT here in Edmonton. I went to their marketing business program, and just an amazing program. And I was very fortunate to earn a bit of a starter spot at the Edmonton Sun, straight out of NAIT, and right into the world of media. That at that time, this was a few years ago, not to totally date myself, but the world was a lot better in the newspaper business, and it was a lot of fun. You know, the rapid deadlines every day, 2-3 different deadlines, and so fast pace. It was really busy, a really fun environment, and honestly, working for the definitive number 2 in the market, I really enjoyed. I kind of liked that scrappy underdog approach to things, and it started early for me, where really expect nothing. To this day, I run with the motto, no one's going to call us, and so you kind of got to go out and get what you get. And so I enjoyed, call it the roller coaster, some of the highs and the lows of the newspaper industry. I spent time in the dailies. I was publisher of a weekly paper. I owned a weekly paper in St. Albert for a period. And unfortunately, the world's not too kind to independent weekly newspapers, and made the tough decision to shut it down. And I had one more stint in the newspaper world and frankly, I loved it. I was manager of content solutions for Post Media, working out of the Edmonton Journal building for a couple of years, and working with the teams across the prairies, giving them an understanding, because it was rather new. This was 2015, 2016, of how to use content for the purposes of connecting with audiences. And those last couple of years, every conversation, you could feel the change happening, where for the longest time, what we sold was the access to the market. If you want to talk to this market, it's through our tool, the newspaper, radio, whatever that might be. Today, the tools are aplenty. The tools are available to everyone, but it became more of, what do we do with these tools, the ideas, the strategy, and that kind of formed the basis of Road55. That, all due respect to my many friends in the newspaper business, I got tired of managing decline, and was looking forward to, when I started Road55, I had kind of the shape of it in my head. I wasn't 100% exactly sure what it looked like, and it took my own dad probably about 4 or 5 months to finally understand and he's a business guy, to understand what it was that I did. But I said, we're going to start right from a very unbiased middle. I have lots of traditional experience, lots of digital, lots of social. Let's just start the conversation around, who are you trying to connect with? What type of ideas and strategy can we do to achieve that? And then, reach out and grab the various tools. And spoiler alert, it usually takes a little bit of everything back to some of the traditional means, and that became the basis of Road55.
You're so speaking my language. I think from the first moment we met, and we have so much in common, we've crossed paths without ever meeting previously, which is interesting. I love it when you talk about that living on the deadline, living on the buzz. When I started in radio, I love that. Like everything had to be a 30-second spot. If you couldn't capture somebody
Yep.
in 30 seconds, you were off the air. One of the first things I was told when I started in radio was, you're selling air. That's what you're selling. You're selling that people are making a choice to connect and to spend time with you. And if you can't capture them in that 30 seconds, you're done. And they were as blunt as that. And when I transitioned to newspaper, working in a small newspaper in St. Albert here, it was the same thing. We had to write snappy copy in a local newspaper that was going to capture that interest. So I'm going to nail you with the first thing that comes to mind is all of us who write content
Yep.
expect it to connect. You know, we expect we have something in our head. What's in your head that is a must when it is connecting with that audience?
As the change in the media landscape, it used to be, whether it was radio, newspaper, it was all about disruption. It's like you're enjoying this content, we're going to disrupt you now, and we're going to put an ad in front of you, in front of your eyes, in front of your ears, and you could say whatever you want. And today, the if the thumb doesn't get you, the speed, I don't want to see this, watch, listen. The system will, like the platforms themselves, will weed you out probably long before the quick thumb on the phone ever gets the chance. So you really have to take that approach of I say to everyone, like, look, I know what you want to do. I know you want to sell your product, sell your service. Like we know that. And you know what? People will probably listen, watch, pay attention for a short burst. But if you want to create a connection, more that longevity of that relationship, you really have to think more in the what's with them, what's in it for me, but for the consumer. And so creating value, that I say, the spirit of, or the pillars of great content, that informative, inspiring, entertaining, all of these things rolled into it that the audience is really going to enjoy. So that's kind of a starting point to, what can we do to make that connection? But then usually, your product, your service kind of peters out after a time. There's only so much you can say about my widget. And I do a lot of different types of content for myself and for Road55, and not a lot of it is marketing content driven. I kind of create these other opportunities to, I draw, I do doodles, I talk, I have a hockey / business podcast. So I create these things that allows me to put our name and our brand out there, but I'm not always yelling about our specific product and service. I talk about at when we're working from, stage one, I'll say, look, I know, without a doubt what your first 5 pieces or 10 pieces of content, episodes, whatever you want to call them, tell me about number 100 and beyond. And let's talk about the sustainability of that. Because when you talk, Larry, about the connection, if you think you're miraculously going to do 3 posts of whatever, and everyone's just going to fall into your butt, like, I'm sorry, it's just not that easy. And if it is that easy to a purchase, I'll say, meet the big boys, Amazon and Google. Like they'll figure out how to connect with them before you will. So, you're kind of back to the drawing board of what can you do to cultivate an engaged audience. That I would say, don't always measure it by the one individual post, all those things, but try to look at them collectively. And even our old business of newspapers, you'd see readership studies. That was never one issue. That was a rolling average of like the last 8 weeks, the last 16 editions is total. And realizing that not everyone's gonna watch, here, listen to every single episode, but collectively, you're always looking for that chance to connect with them.
You hit on a really good point of, well, you're hitting on lots of good points. So I'm not going to say just one, but you do bring me back to those radio days where you wouldn't have just one spot, and you wouldn't buy a spot for, say 9:30 at night or 6:30 in the evening, if that was going to be the time that people turn the radio off to have their
Right.
dinner. You want it to be on the road. You want it to be in those drive times, but it was never a one and done. You had to have that repetitive message that changed ever so slightly in a course.
I keep an old document. I don't know where it originated, but Thomas Smith wrote it, and it's Successful Advertising from 1885. And it talks about, it goes through like the frequency of 20 advertisements, and just think, this is 130 years ago, and how the first half dozen, no one's even paying any attention, don't notice it, and till it finally goes, there it is again. Oh, there must be something to this, and on and on. And it's amazing how true it was then to really just replace the medium, and it's true to this day.
How do you get through the noise? This is what I find we are moving at such an enormously fast pace.
Yeah.
So we're like on the tail end of a rocket ship going up, and there's spewing fuel everywhere. And that seems to me to be that social media shouting. And social media in the beginning, I guess, was supposed to be social. It was supposed to be connecting. And as our days in radio and our days in newspaper, it was to connect people to a similar story and have them moved by that content. How do we get through that noise these days so that we, one, don't appear to be shouting? And I'm talking about that 100th post. I'm talking about that 1,000th post. So we're consistent out there, but I don't want to be seen as the shouter in the room.
Great point, Lori, where you're not just trying to stand out in your own vertical, your own industry. You're competing as much with the local bakery and car dealership for that same attention, that same, whatever that is, 3 square inches of screen space. And back to that, what might connect with your audience. And again, if whatever your widget is, whatever you're offering, if you're trying to use what I call the technical specs of your offering, it's super difficult to stand out. I like teasing my friends in the real estate industry. It's like, oh yeah, go with that 3-bedroom 2-story on it's so miraculous. Like that's going to be what makes you stand out. And in Edmonton, I think there's 3,500 realtors, and it always amazes me how many try to use their product to stand out from the crowd. So I always advocate for let's look for other opportunity to back in the inspiration, the entertainment, the different ways that you can get that like-minded audience. By all means, talk about your product and service, and I don't want to discount that, but you kind of have to they've got to be there to hear it in the first place, and if it doesn't matter what you say, so you've got to come up with ways that keeps them close, and to that consistency, that frequency of that, from 1885, you needed 20 ads just to finally make that connection. You talk about 100 episodes. I would think creating that consistency in what you do, because if you take a week off, a month off, 2 months off, not only will your direct competitors fill that void, but every other industry out there is trying to create something to make that connection. And you're bang on. There's so much noise out there, and I'll add to that too. I believe that I think we're coming out of this phase where I say the cheating of the system. That forget all this awareness, engagement. I've just figured out how to. I pay for this click, and bang, they buy from me, and it's just, oh, this is wonderful. Why would I do any of this other stuff? Well, guess what? The back alley operation in Texas has figured out how to market in your local community to do the exact same thing, and they don't care about that awareness or engagement, and they've gone to that, and all of a sudden everyone's fighting for that last click. Well, cost goes up, engagement goes down, and what happens? It kind of goes back to tried and true that people, sales 101, they buy from people they like and know and trust, and really investing in that part of what you do.
How important is it, Rob, to have all of the different channels on the go at the same time? So let's say that you're savvy out there. I'm not saying I am at all. So that's why you're here.
Yeah.
Let's say that you are, so everybody is saying, you need to be on this and you need to be on that, and you're on LinkedIn and you're on Facebook and you're on Twitter and you're on, and all of a sudden, three other social media markets open up, and TikTok, and you can't keep track of them all. How important is it really to be on everything in a small way, or abundance,
Yeah.
or to focus, because I've heard different commentary on this, or to focus on where you feel most comfortable, where you will find, and you had hit on this, your like-minded crowd. So I'm hoping you're going to agree with the like-minded crowd thought, but I really want to know, how important is it to be everywhere?
You'd said earlier about, the early days of social media was being social, and I think we all have a friend or three or 100 that we see their post on Facebook, and then you go over to Instagram and the exact same post is there, and you go to Twitter and the exact same post is there. And so one of the things I advocate for, and it's hard, I realize that sometimes the tools are there to make one thing, clickety click, and it goes everywhere. But in many ways, it's not serving the platform the best that it can. So it's kind of go with the platforms that you're able to do the right type of content in the right place at the right time. You don't create a static beautiful image and then just expect that to go over to TikTok, because it won't translate those two extremes that way. But you're right. You can go down a rabbit hole and lose the entire day as you're trying to serve. So you definitely hit a point where you can't do everything everywhere. So maybe focus on what you feel are the best, two, three, four platforms that serve your business. Or in many cases, like the folks here, I'm sure there's a lot of opportunity for their individual brand as well, to build that trust and authority on the different platforms. And I would encourage that to take that pause, and rather than that click once, go everywhere, consider, okay, what's that little twist? It might be from the same event, but two different pictures and a different take, and it just gives a little bit different feel that way. And they gauge accordingly. You'll hit a point where you do it, you guesstimate the best you can, you're making an educated guess, but then you have the opportunity to look and listen and see what's hitting, what isn't. And you may just hit the point that you know what, Twitter's not for me, it's not for my business, doesn't seem to be doing that right type of thing. I'm going to take that time and energy, and I'm going to try something on this platform. With the, again, back to, don't do the 2-3 things, like be committed to it. I'm going to go with it for a period of time. I'm going to give it the 100 reps, whatever that looks like, and then just give it a good review at that point. Is this part of what we should be doing?
In that brand awareness, when we're putting things out on different platforms, that consistency of color, that consistency of brand placement,
Yeah.
when you're doing different media strategies with that content, how important is that? And again, I'm hearing different channels that say, shake it up, it's not that important, or yes, where you place it, how you place it, how you use it is paramount. You change your message within. What do you see when you're working?
I prefer to see some continuity in the look and feel, the brand, and I have some clients too where we'll do something digitally or a video, that kind of thing, and then you'll see them do a traditional piece, a print ad or whatever, and it looks totally different. It doesn't match anything at all, and I think you're missing an opportunity, because you're probably at that point you're measuring everything in ones and twos and thinking that each independent piece that you're doing is gonna create that conversion on its own, when really it's all these things working together. And I bought a can of pop, but I don't know if it was the radio ad in my car or the POS sign when I walked in, or the clerk saying, "Hey, have you thought about having a pop?" The old what's your H to H strategy? What's your human to human strategy when and not to discount that in today's world.
What's a big win for you, Rob? Like what's a client that you've worked with? You don't have to tell us who the client is unless they want the free advertising. But what's a big win of that you would use as an example of what was done well to create that content that connected?
Yeah, we work with a real estate team in St. Albert that we have a lot of fun with, and right from day one, I wish I could have recorded their faces as I said to them. I'm like, oh, by the way, we're not doing any real estate advertising or very little. And I jokingly said there in that small market, there's 200-300 other realtors doing a really uh, um, good job of just trying to use product to make them stand out. So right from the get-go, we took an approach of personality and community in everything that they did. And I've never once seen a listing go viral unless it's like so insanely priced, or you've seen those, but those are like one every 10,000. But we've done some quirky videos with them that unpaid promotion gets 10,000 views, and they're not afraid to have a little fun with it and put themselves out there and try some different things. And I'm big on that too. That I realize we're going to try 10 things. I know there's going to be a few duds that fall to the ground, but that's how we're going to find the ones that really stand out. And yeah, the first year we started working with them, they won the Chamber of Commerce, the marketing award for the year, and based on that work, and so yeah, quite proud of that stuff.
I love your newsletter, as you know.
Oh, thank you.
Take me through the 5x5.
Yeah, so totally over and above with the 55 theme, and but hey, as I was just saying, try to keep it in the theme family. um, I had this idea in my head. I wanted to create something to, again, create that connection on a ongoing basis. So the 5x5 newsletter goes out every Wednesday, and it's 5 minutes for 5 things that might be of interest to you, that might inspire you, educate you, entertain you. That I guess first and foremost, it does all of those things for me. And by sharing it, in some ways, it's a bit of an extension that, you know what, if you resonate with these things, I like our chances of being able to do something down the road, because we're like-minded. If you hated all this and unsubscribed, I'm not worried about it, because odds are like next to nothing that we would ever work together. I had on my website from day one, we're asshole free. We don't work with assholes. And sorry to swear on you, but anyways, the 5x5. So we do 5 things we share. And it was funny. I'd been going for about a month and a half, and my lead production guy, Trevor, he's like, "Yeah, it's great." And the meaning of 5x5, and I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" He's like, "Well, 5x5 comes from World War II. It's a communications term that means I understand you perfectly." And so I went and found. I'm like, okay, it just reinforced the whole uh, um, reason of using that. And again, the 55 I use lots. The 5x5. I also, just to share another 5x5 thing I do 5 things every day, 5 days a week, to grow my business. And that's my, I'm the, no one's telling me who to call on, what to do each day, and you can take the day off. And I can't control the outputs of our business. I can't control if I have a client who their budget gets cut, or their business gets affected, or they don't like us anymore. Things happen. I can't control that necessarily, but I can really control the input. And so I run with that 5x5. And hey, you know what we're doing here right now? Here's one thing. So I've got 4 more things to do today, be it a coffee meeting, or doing a post, or creating some content, or making a cold call. And I'm a real big believer in that. And it's funny. It doesn't matter if you sell donuts, real estate, marketing, benefits. I think it's a great tactic that, as little as it sounds, most will fail at it. Most will not be able to achieve that. But if you do it every week, you're putting 25 lines in the water, and I like your chances of a couple things coming out the other
Well,
end.
and it's consistency that works over the long term. It's keeping yourself out there. You hit on something with your newsletter that I love. It again, it resonates with me very highly. It is, you write the newsletter because it entertains you. It's something that it's important to you. It takes me back to, I've written for years. I've written fiction for, since I was a teenager. And, I had that stack of rejection letters that come in from the publishers. No, 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 no. And finally I was fed up. And, my husband said to me, he's like, you're writing for the wrong people. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you have to write the story that you'd actually want to read. Do you want to read that shit? And, and I was like, well, I thought it was pretty good, and I had come from that radio and newspaper, and I was thinking of the audience first. The moment I turned it around and I wrote something that I would be entertained by, I kid you not, the first publisher I sent it to was the publisher that published it. And it's the publisher that still
Awesome.
gets that genre of books when I write.
Yep. That's awesome.
So
Yeah.
I love that. If you write it for you, you will attract that like-minded individual into your business.
Well, Rob, first off, I'm sorry I missed a good portion of your conversation here because I was doing a media interview.
Oh, no worries. Nice to see you.
Yeah, I guess retail sales figures are out and they're down significantly across Canada, and so implications. But one of the things that we've been struggling with as an organization is the tone in our social media. I feel that we're too conservative, and we're an organization that it's the Credit Counseling Society. So we're dealing with people in debt and money, and debt and money are not funny things. And so the challenge is, what is that right level we should be at? I was just sharing with our director of marketing today that I renewed my contract with TELUS, dropped my bill by $100. Took a little work, but I got that. But they sent me a nice email saying, Scott, thanks a bunch.
Yeah.
Very simple message. So my gut tells me that we need to get it down to that more friendly, approachable language across all platforms, because we're just not resonating, I don't think, with people who are younger than me.
Yeah. No, politics kills a brand. And by that, I'm not picking on my politician friends, but the different departments, the different, can do this, can't do that, where all of a sudden this groupthink gets it into this really, okay, we've not offended anyone. Everyone's, it's okay, but there's nothing stand out about it. And I don't mean to be outlandish or, crossing lines or anything like that. I realize that there's I call it the high level brand integrity that's hard to think of. Well, we don't necessarily want our full brand to be viewed as fun and goofy and lighthearted, and that. What jumps to my mind real quick, Scott, is possibly creating some voices, some sub brands, if you will, or some trusted authority in different demographics that you feel might connect better. And as an organization, give them a little, flexibility in how they, like, here's your points, not here's your script, and let them introduce that to, again, whatever the specific audience is that you're trying to say, okay, here's our 22-year-old female, and she's going to take our messaging that we want out, but she's going to do it on TikTok with music. And I'm just a quick quirky example, but rather than trying to, and I'm sorry, I don't know your organization fully or everything that you work with, but rather than trying to make everything fit in that one specific box.
Well, that's kind of where my headspace is at. Where our brand continuity is important, but I've been speaking with our education team, our counseling team, and we've got different ages, different demographics, And very much what you're saying is give them some guidelines and let them get at it and don't script them. And so it's a bit of a balance with our director of marketing. He wants to be very consistent, but it's not resonating. So
Well, and I think you heard me talk about I'm fearless at trying 10 things and knowing I will epically fail 3 or 4 times. And as an organization, you have to be prepared to let people fail, because I've worked in organizations where small golf clap if you did okay, if you had a big win, medium win, but Lord help you if it didn't work, we are going to publicly beat you with the stick in the middle of the square. And what all of a sudden you wake up 5 years later, 10 years later, and you've built an organization that everyone's trying to just stay in these lines. And you know what? You're not really rewarded to go up, but just don't ever try anything, because it's not worth it on that end. And then those are the types of people that, so, when you try these different things, realizing that there's going to be a few bumps and mistakes along the way. But I think if you're positively working towards it, everyone will be happy at the end.
yeah, good. Thank you.
One of the things you don't know about Scott, because he's modest and he wouldn't tell you, we go way back, and Scott has built a phenomenal organization. So 2 things to know in that is, 1, he has an excellent culture, and 2, he keeps his people for a long term. So even though, Scott, you have people in different age demographics, based on what Rob was saying, why wouldn't you let your people say what keeps them there? What keeps them working in these with people who are in those highly emotional that I've had the great privilege of talking to your staff, and Stacy's become a great friend. People are in an emotional trauma and they don't want to deal with financial stress issues, but your people stay and your people continue to work with them. Why? And so Rob gave a great idea early on with the real estate people. Why not have them tell that story?
That's kind of what we're thinking along those lines, make it real.
I have one quick question, and consistency is not my friend. I know that. But then again, like Lori said, there's all this different information. Like, should we be posting 3 times a day, or is 3 times a week okay? Or is it just that you're doing it at the same time on a regular basis?
Yeah, I guess the first back at you would be, well, tell me about what you're posting. And I'd say if it's here's my features, here's my tech, that there's probably a couple times is too much, because the audience. So what are you giving, and what value are you creating? Is it new information? Is it repetition? And then considering the platform too. On Twitter, post away all day, like the thing's just a running wheel. But on some of the other platforms, it sits there for a longer time too, right? So you be a little bit mindful, but really put the onus back on yourself of how much value are we creating in what we post, and that becomes your first question to answer. But yeah, and then the second part would be looking at the platforms a little bit differently as to the amounts.
What I want you to consider in the last word is, where are we going with the content explosion? And if it was burning before our COVID days, it has now turned into that inferno on all of these different channels. Where do you see us going? And is there a way to narrow that down for?
Yeah. COVID brought a lot of content creators to the table, if you will, and mostly the time and I got something I'll start a podcast, whatever that looks like. I think you're going to see a thinning of that in the next as couple of years, as we go back to, the normal life. And then you'll see those who remain committed to the frequency of what they're doing, that message will plow through, and they'll be able to stand out. I mentioned earlier that I think that the tools got so good connecting point A to point B with from the conversion standpoint, that those days are shortening, because you're just eventually going to lose out to the biggest companies in the space, because they will always have more money to pay for that remember folks, it's all auction based at the end. There's no fixed pricing in digital. If you're paying $1 today and it's working, someone's going to pay $1.10 tomorrow, and it'll just keep going out. So it really goes back to what I believe is the don't try to cheat the system. If you have plans to be in business 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I nicely say, well, let's act like it. Let's act like we're not trying to move heaven and earth next week and for results, and you know, to that content side, to give to the audience, to connect with that audience to the point where frankly you're not selling anything at all. They're just buying from you because they trust you, they like you, you know, that type of approach.
Oh, thank you so much for coming in. This has been incredibly informative. And I hope that I can have you back again, because I'd like to do a more in-depth look at some of these things. But thanks to everybody for coming in.
Yeah.
I love it. Have a great week, and thanks again for coming in.